Hi everyone, welcome to day 27. I am Gaurav and today we'll be learning about state management using a combination of the use reducer hook as well as the use context hook. Then we will learn about how we can do routing at the client side in React. Okay, so these are the two topics that we will be focusing on in today's session. So let's get started with the session for today. So we'll begin with where we had left off in the previous session. So we were learning about we had learned how to build a to-do app, right? First we had built it using the use state hook. Then we replaced all the state management logic. We moved it from the use state hook and we consolidated it inside the we consolidated all the state update logic using the use reducer hook. All right, we wrote reducers and it took care of the state update logic. Now let's take a look at how we can you know uh, combine use context as well as reducer and make changes to our to do app. So let me start by running the site pnbm dev. Okay, so this is where it's being hosted. So you can see this was our to do app that we were working on, right? And let's just go over the code once so that you guys remember all the things that we had done. So here we had let me zoom this a bit for you guys. Okay, so here we had our initial to do's, right? The first one was done. Then we had the component for the to do app. Here we were using the reducer. We passed the reducer function over here and the initial to do's. Uh, this variable was holding the state, and this function allowed us to dispatch actions which would basically call the reducer function, and the particular action would be available to the reducer function, right? So this was the reducer function which we had written. So we had actions for adding to dos, modifying the existing to dos, and removing a to do. So this was the logic. All of that was we had written inside the to dos reducer, and this is what we were passing over here, right? So using the dispatch function, we were able to dispatch actions, and which would basically call our reducer, and once the state was updated, it would re-render the component where we were using the reducer. All right, and we had two other components, add to do and to do list. Add to do was responsible for adding a new to do, right? And we were calling this function add to do would get called with the text that we were passing over here. And then this function would get called and it would dispatch the add action. Then we had the to-do list component which was responsible for displaying all the to-dos, right? And then we had the to-do component which had the logic for deleting a particular to-do. And whenever we were changing, checking or unchecking whether a to-do is completed or not, the change event would get triggered, and then basically the handle to do change function would get called and we would dispatch the change action. And similarly, when we were clicking on remove, this action would get dispatched and the particular to do would be removed, right? So that is what we had done in the previous session, and we had also looked at how to prevent prop drilling using the use context hook, and what are the benefits of using the context hook, as well as we created a theme context, which we were basically using to toggle between a light theme and a dark theme for an app, right? So this was all the code that we had written so far. So uh, now what we will do is we will see how we can combine the two and do a state management at the level of the app. Okay. Now what we can do here is right now we are passing all of these functions, right? If you see the logic for removing and adding a to do, we have callbacks, right? Now this is fine over here, because we have, very small, I mean, we have less number of components. But suppose we have we have hundreds of components in the middle between, the topmost component and the you know there is a long component tree, right? It has a lot of descendants, this, top component. And if one of the, uh, deeply nested components would require the logic for modifying a particular to do, then in that case, like how we are doing it over here, we are passing the to do change and to do delete to the to do list. Then this passes the, you know to do change and to do delete to the to do component, right? Over here, if you can see. All right, so this is all right because we have very few components, so there is no problem. But if we had, hundreds of, components in the middle, in that scenario, it would be very difficult to handle, updation of the state, right? If one of the components in the middle would require that, then we would have to drill down all the way to the level of that particular component. So suppose, there are hundreds of components, and maybe the 80th component, at level 80, that particular component requires the ability to remove a to do. So in that case, we would have to provide props all the way down to that component. So in order to solve such kind of issues, and also take care of updating the, I mean, also take care of state management, right? We'll combine both of these two hooks together. So let's start with that now. The first thing that we will be doing is we'll be creating contexts over here. Okay. And what we will do is we will put each of these. This reducer is giving us a state variable and a dispatch function, right? We'll put both of these in their own context, and we'll share those contexts wherever needed. Okay. So for that, let's create two context variables. To do to do's context equals create context, and we'll pass the initial value as null. And similarly, we'll create a context for the dispatch function. So we'll say to do's dispatch context equals create context, and we'll set this to null. Okay. Then what we want to do is we will export both of these and use them where required. And here what we will do is first we will say to do's context dot provider. So we will wrap all of the components which would require the state as well as the dispatch functionality inside the providers, right? So to do's context dot provider. Okay, so this is the closing, and we'll set the value. Now this context is for the to do's, right? The state associated with the to do's. So we'll set the value of that to this, whatever is the state returned by the to do's. And then we need another context provider for the dispatch functionality, right? So we will say to do's dispatch context dot provider, and we will move this all the way here, and the value for this we will set as the dispatch function. Okay, all right, let's save this. So the app is still running. Now what we want to do is we can now get rid of the callbacks which we had, provided for each of these components. So this component just needs to update, needs to dispatch the action of add, right? So what we will do is we'll get rid of this. Okay, and we will copy this function, remove it from here, go to the component add to do, and here what we will do is we no longer need this, and what we need is the context, right? We want to be able to dispatch actions, so we'll say const dispatch equals use context, and we need the to do's dispatch context, right? So this will give us access to the dispatch function returned by the reducer, correct? And then here, instead of calling the callback which was wired over here, what we will do is let's just paste that function over here, and let's just directly call the dispatch action from here. Let's get rid of this, and we need the next id, right? So the next id variable was defined here. Let's move this from this file to this particular file over here. Let's save this and save this, right? So we can see that we have successfully removed the we have removed the functionality of the callback functionality, and we have removed the logic from the props. Instead we are now using the dispatch functionality. So let's see if it is still working. So new to do with dispatch. Okay, let's click on add, and you can see that it is still adding that to do. So we have successfully replaced the functionality of callback with the dispatch functionality here, right? Now let's try and do the same thing for the other components as well. So here what we will do is we will go inside the to-do list. Now this requires to-dos, right? So instead of getting the to-dos from here, what we will do is we will remove this. We'll go inside the to-do list. We no longer need this as a prop. Instead, what we will do is we will read this from uh, the to-dos context. So we'll say const to-dos equals use context to-dos context, right? And let's save this, and you can still see that all of the to-dos are being shown. Okay, so we have successfully removed the dependency of this component on the to-do items, right? And similarly, the next thing that we will do is let's try and get rid of this as well. So we'll get rid of these, and let's try and remove the dependency of these two as well. So here let's get rid of these two functions as well, and this needs this needs the ability to trigger the change as well as the remove actions, right? So we'll do that directly over here. So we'll say const dispatch equals use context to do's dispatch context. All right. And here what we will do is, let's go to our to do app. Let's copy this and let's remove this function. And over here, we want to dispatch the change action, and then this was the updated to do, right? So let's replace this with this particular functionality. We can now get rid of this. Okay, and similarly for this one as well. Let's copy this and let's get rid of this function. And here what we want to do is we want to call the dispatch, and here we will say whatever was the to do that we want to remove, we will pass its ID. Okay, and here now we can then get rid of these two props as well. Let's save this, and you can see that to do's, I mean the app is working fine. Let's try and see if we're able to update the state. So let me set this to done, and you can see that it is being it's updating the status for this to done. Let me try and remove this one. So you can see it is removing that particular to do as well. So we have successfully removed the dependency of these two components on the parent component, right? So now they are decoupled, right? They're no longer dependent on each other. Whatever data they need, they will get that data from the context, right? So this particular component just needed the ability to dispatch action. So we got the dispatch function from the to do's dispatch context. And similarly, the to do list, it needed the ability to get the to do's, right? And we are, in order to display them, so we are getting all of the to do's from the to do's context. And these to do's we basically passed to this to do element, right? And this needed the ability to remove a particular to do or update, set the a particular to do to done. So this just needed the dispatch context, which once again we got from this, right? And with very few changes, we have been able to combine the use reducer hook and the context hook and remove the dependencies of passing props and passing data through props. Instead, wherever uh, a particular context is required, we are able to read that and get the job done, right? So our app is still working the way it was working before, right? New to do, and you can see it has been added and we are able to modify it. So far, do you guys have any doubts related to this functionality? Like, what is I mean, how did we pass the context? How did we make our state accessible throughout different components? So we were able to share the state and the state management logic throughout different components using a combination of use reducer and use context. So any question related to this? All right, so if there are no questions, let's do one thing. Let's try and add some more changes to our code. Why have we Okay, so let's try and do that now. Let's move the logic. So those of you who are here, focus on whatever you are learning over here. Don't worry about the viewership. The viewership might be less because there are exams going on. Some people are still on the previous sessions. So there are various reasons for it. If you go back to the old videos, you can see the views increase after the live stream, right? Because a lot of people are not able to you know manage their backlogs and all of those things. So there are a wide number of reasons, but right now you're here, focus on what we're building and focus on learning. Don't worry about who is there, who is not there, right? Even if one person is there, there's no problem. All right, so let's get back to the app, and let's make some more modifications over here. We can further optimize this logic. Okay, and what we will do is we will create another file. Let's call that as to-dos context.jsx. And what we will do is we will move out the logic related to the context and the reducers from the app, and we'll move it to a separate file. So here what we will do is let's copy all of this. Let's cut it from here. Let's paste it here. Then the next thing that we want to do is let's get rid of this as well and paste it. Let's create a component over here. All right, and let's move all of this to the top. Okay, and here we want to get the initial to-dos and the to-dos reducer, and let's get rid of this. And what we will do now is all the code that we had written over here related to the context. Let's copy this for a few minutes. Let this component return this instead. And instead of returning these, what this component will do is let's call this as to-dos provider. Since this is responsible for providing we will use this component for providing the context throughout the app, right? So let's call this as the to-dos provider, and this will receive the children prop, which is a special prop, right? And so we will pass the children, whatever are the children, we whatever components which are nested inside this to-dos provider, right? They will be available as children, and we will replace, basically they will be rendered here, and the context will be, both of these contexts would be provided to the children, right? Okay. Let's save this, and what we will do is wherever we were using this, we had to make use of the use context hook, right? So let's create two custom hooks. Const use to do's equals use uh, context, right? And here we will just say, sorry, to do's context. And similarly, let's create another one, use dispatch, and here we will say to do's dispatch context, like this. Okay, and inside our to do's app, instead of having all of this, right, we will get rid of this, And we will wrap all of these components inside the to do provider which we had just written, right? Okay. And wherever we were using the use context and all of those things, instead we can now say use dispatch. Okay, what we need to do is we need to export those two hooks, right? Those two custom hooks. So we need to say export use to do's and export use dispatch. And here we will say use dispatch, right? And similarly, inside the to do list, where we need to use the to do's, you will say use to do's. And where we need to use the dispatch function, we will say use dispatch, like this. Let's get rid of all of the unused imports. And okay, this is fine. Add to do. We don't no longer need these two imports. And similarly, inside the to do app, let's get rid of these two as well. All right, let's see if there is any. What is the error? Create context is not defined. All right, so we need to import this from React. Okay, so we'll say create context. Use reducer is not defined. So let's import that as well. Use reducer. All right, so all of the errors have been resolved, and let's try if it's still working. So update is working, remove is working, and add is working as well. So what we have done over here is that we have successfully removed all of the state management logic outside into a separate sorry, separate component. And this is responsible for the you know the for providing the context, as well as providing I mean this is basically encapsulating all of the reducer logic as well as the context logic, and we have separated it out from the main component, right? The to do app component. Now the to do app component just deals with displaying the components which are needed to work with the to do app, which is add to do and display the to do list. And then these components in turn are just responsible for one thing. So the to do list is just responsible for showing the to dos, and the to do component is responsible for displaying the to do as well as modifying, removing a to do or updating a to do. So each component has its own responsibility. So this is what we have done. We have been able to do it. And the benefit of this is that suppose I have another component, right? uh, Say what I want to do is I want to create another component called completed to do's dot jsx. Okay, and here what we will do is we will say, instead of this we'll just say section h1 completed to do's, and here we will say const completed to do's equals, or rather here we will say to do's equals use to do's, right? And const completed to do's equals, if to do's are there, So we are checking if there's a length. In that case, we will do to do's dot filter to do where to do dot done, right? This value is true, and otherwise we will just return null. Okay, and here we will say completed to do's dot map to do, and this will return paragraph basically, and we will say here key equals to do dot id, and here we will just say display to do dot text like this. Okay, and what we can do here is we can have a conditional rendering. uh, Completed to do's dot length. If this condition is true, then we display this. Otherwise, what we will do is we will display uh, a paragraph, and here we will say that no to do's completed yet. Okay, and let's move this component inside the to do's app, and here we will say completed to do's, right? So you can see whichever to do's we have completed, they are being shown over here. Let me click on this. So this is showing up over here as well, and let me remove this. So you can see that it is updating that as well. Okay, so the benefit is that, wherever you need a particular state, you can directly access it, and it is available throughout the application, and any component can use it the way that component needs it, right? So this component was just responsible for showing the completed to do's. We can have another component which just shows the uncompleted ones, right? uh, so uh, all of that complexity is very easily, we are able to manage all of that thanks to the combination of having a global state management or state management at the level of the app, right? So it is a very powerful concept of combining use reducer and context together, and you can build a complex app with ease, and you can easily do the state management, right? So I hope this is clear to you guys, how we were able to move out the logic into a provider component which was responsible for taking care of the state management, and then how we consumed uh, the state, as well as how we were able to modify the state using the dispatch function provided by the reducer hook. And also we made use of the reducer function to take care of the uh, state management logic. So you can see that over here none of these components deal with they do not have the logic for uh, updating the component. They just trigger actions, and there is one central place which is responsible for modifying the state, right? So wherever you need to modify the state, you just dispatch an action from that component, and there's a central state management which takes care of modifying the state based on the action it is getting, right? And the logic is in one place, and all of the other components are free from the logic of updating the state. They either tell the you know they either inform that this is the action which needs to happen, this action has happened, and then the state is updated, or either they are just responsible for showing the state of the UI and displaying it in the app. Okay, so this is all about state management. So in React, there is this principle of single source of truth. That is what we follow while defining our state, right? So the principle basically states that there is a single source of truth, which basically means that there is only a single state, and which is basically over here, right? Where is it? Yeah, to do's context. So this is our single state, and whatever updates are happening to this component, right? It's not like each component has its own what do you say, state. Instead, what is happening is we have provided a common state, right? And nobody updates that state directly. Instead, what happens is we are dispatching actions, right? Those actions will inform the reducer, which is responsible for managing the state or updating the state, right? These actions will trigger the reducer function, which will update the state. Once the state is updated, wherever that state was being used, right, in all the components wherever it was being used, those components get the updated state value, right? So for example, uh, the to-do list component is it's reading all the to-dos, right? And this is reading the to-dos as well and just filtering them out by the status of them being completed or not, right? So the moment I'm updating, right, so this is basically inside the to-do list. We do not have the update logic. This is not directly modifying the state. Instead, what it is doing is it is dispatching an action. Then that action basically triggers the central I mean the state manager, which is the reducer function, correct? And that reducer function will modify the state, and wherever that state is being used, all the components get updated. So there's one central place or one single source of truth, right? And nobody modifies it directly, and it is being read, and wherever it is being read, it those components are getting the updated state for that, right? So the moment I uncheck this, the state is up, the UI is updated here as well, in this component as well as this one. And since I am setting this to done, the checkbox is being shown over here, as well as the to do is being shown under here. So both of these components were reading the state, right? So we just modified it at one place, and wherever it was being used, it is being reflected. The update is being reflected. Okay, so this is how you share data in a React app, especially when there's a very complex app. Uh, so I hope this is all clear to you guys. Okay, all right. Uh, the next topic that we will be looking at is it has to do with we'll be building quite a lot of apps in React, and there's a very good extension available known as React Dev Tools. So you can install it from Chrome. I already have it installed. Okay, and what this component allows us to do is when you open the developer tools, right, you will have two more additional tabs over here, one for components and the other one for profiler. We look at the components tab. So what this is doing is that just how we have the elements right over here. So you're seeing all of the elements in HTML, right? Instead over here, you see all of the React components being used. Okay, so we can see that we have the to do app, then we have the to dos provider, we have the context provider, and you can see that the first context provider was for the list of to dos, right? So you can see that we have the values over here. So you can inspect the state over here. You no longer, I mean, you can see the current state, right? So you can see that this one is done, right? Learn JavaScript is done. So it is showing the data as true, sorry, done as true. So we can basically see the objects. You can see it over here and you can see the component which is having that. Suppose I change this, right? So you can see that it modified the state over here as well. So you can see the current state value, whatever that component is holding, you can see all of its objects, right? Then it's also giving us which component is rendering this. Okay, so the context provider is being rendered by the to dos provider, which is in turn being rendered by the to do app, which in turn is rendered by create root, and this is coming from React DOM, right? Version 18. So it's giving you the hierarchy as well. Let's go inside the add to do component, and you can see that it's telling you which props it has. So it's not having any props. It's having this hook, the so this is the hook which we were using, right? The dispatch reducer action. You can see that over here. It only has this hook, right? And it has the state as well. So this is the, you can see it is having the dispatch hook as well as the use state hook, and the value for this is empty. Let me type something over here, uh, some value. So you can see that we have this change handler, right, which is updating the state variable. So as the state is getting updated, you can see this value over here as well. Okay, then over here we have the to-do list. It doesn't have any props, but it does have the hook, right, which is all the to-dos, correct? And this is rendered by the to-do app. And then we have the to-do, which is getting some props, which is the to do, right? So let's go inside the to do list, and you can see the to do component receives the prop, right? So this is what it is showing over here, and it has the dispatch hook. Okay, and it is showing that. So this is a very useful tool, and it is giving you can visually see what data that component is holding at the present point of time. You can also see which component is rendering it. So you can see that this is rendered by the to-do list. The to-do component is rendered by the to-do list. So it is very good for debugging your application, uh, and playing around with the state as well. So we can modify the state from here as well. So suppose I set this to updated state. So you can see that we are able to update the state as well. Okay, so this is the benefit of using a tool like this. You can, and I mean, right now we have a very simple app, but when we have a very complex app which has hundreds of components and a very deep nested hierarchy, you can easily go through, it's very easy to navigate through different components. Suppose you're not able to understand how a particular app is working, you can just, or you don't know which is the parent component for a particular component, you can just come to that component, see who is rendering it, click on that, uh, and you can find out, okay, this is rendered by the to do app. And then you can come to your code base, search for to do app, and the to do app file basically. And there you go, you will see the logic for that component over here. Or you can also see it from here. You can search to do app. Okay, this is the source code for the to do app. Suppose I am interested in the to do list, so this is the source code for the to do list. And what are all the states that this component is holding? What is it receiving? What are the props? What are the hooks being used? What are the state variables provided by the use state hook? What are those values? All of that you can easily see from this component, right? So this is a very useful extension. I recommend that you guys install it and play around with it. uh, you know it will help you enhance your understanding of React, how things are rendered, what is the hierarchy in the tree. Because using this you do not understand the things, right? Because you've written all of your code in React, and this makes it very easy to understand the tree hierarchy, right? So uh, yeah, so I hope you guys found this useful, and I hope you will install it and play around with it. Okay, very helpful in debugging. And you also have other features like, suppose we are inside the to-do list, right? And we want to see its DOM element, right? So you just click on this, and it will take you to the element which is rendered by that component. So we know that this UL list is being rendered by that to-do list component, right? You have other options as well. Suppose you want to log the data which is there inside this component. Let's click on this, and if you go to the console, you can see that it is rendering all of that in the console. Okay, these are the hooks, right? It's giving us the line number and all of the file name as well. What are the subhooks? The HTML, and yeah, it says that we can right click, and you can store this as a global variable as well. So for example, let me right click on this, and you can see that it is available as temp1. Now I can do something like temp1 dot id or temp1 dot name. It's giving me the name of that component. And yeah, so you can basically play around with these elements, right? Let me, for example, what I will do is, let me store this as a global object. So we can do something like temp2 at index, say 2, right, which is this element, dot text. We can access it, and let's try and modify it. Learning reducer hook, right? So anyways, we tried and modified, but this did not trigger any state changes. But yeah, anyways, you can example the variables from here, and you can play around with the values in the console. So this is a very useful functionality which is available. So you can try and uh, use this. And now we clicked on view source code, and it took us to the source code associated with that component. So all in all, a very useful extension for you know going through an app. All right, um, let's take a short break over here, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So in case you guys have any doubts or comments, let me know right now. Okay. So there's a question by Soumitra. He is asking, can we use an empty array instead of null? Yeah, you can use it. It's up to you. But we used null over here because we just wanted to emphasize that, initially it is null, and then when we are modifying the context, then the appropriate value is being set. But you can use an empty array as well. Can we do, there's a request, can we do doing about Django projects? uh, Currently the front end bootcamp is restricted to teaching you guys about JavaScript and building the web front end using JavaScript and related technologies, which are based on JavaScript. So we won't be working with Django, right? And I mean, off late, in the past, in the past few years, all of the focus has been on JavaScript. Okay, so you can use it on the server side as well as client side. You can, and there are frameworks available like Next.js, uh, and Gatsby, and well, Gatsby is getting old now, but I mean, not a lot of people are using it. But Next.js is quite popular, which allows us to render React on the server side as well. And we have, so we can do server side rendering using, Next.js. Then there are other frameworks which have zero JavaScript concept like Astro, which is very good for static sites. And I think they're coming up with server side rendering as well. Or maybe they have already introduced it. So all of the innovation is happening, you know, at the, using JavaScript basically, whether it's build tools such as Vite, or frameworks which allow, whether you're doing client side rendering or server side rendering, or static site generation. So all of those frameworks are primarily based on JavaScript. That is why the focus of, the bootcamp has been on JavaScript, right? So if you want to learn Django, I mean, there's no problem with it, but it's something that we will not be covering in this, boot camp. You can do that on your own. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next topic. So we want to learn about how can we do routing in React, and how we can build single page applications using React with the help of the React router component, right? Let's take a look at that, how we can do that. Let me set up a new project for the purpose of demonstrating that. All right, give me a second. Where is the terminal? All right, let's clear this. Cd dot dot. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to do npm create Vite. We want to create a new Vite project. We want to call it as day 27 router. We'll build a React project and we will be using JavaScript. Okay. Let's go inside day 27 router. Let's do pnpm install. You can use whichever package manager you like. You can use yarn, you can use npm. I'm going with this. Okay. All right, so it's doing its setting up. Let's open this in VS Code. I'll maximize this. Let me get minimize this and maximize this. All right, we'll do pnpm dev, and if everything is working fine, it should render that. Let's open this so you can see the startup code is available and we are able to view this. So everything is set up correctly. Let's make some changes to this. Let's get rid of this. And we'll say intro to routing. We'll move this inside the h1 tag. Okay. Let's get rid of these. All right. So we want to set up routing. Okay. So for that, what we will do is we will add a module which provides us that functionality. So we will say, one second. All right. So we will say pm add. You can, if you're not using pnpm, you can do npm install, and the name of the module is react router dom. Okay. This is the module which provides us the functionality for setting up routing. So it has installed this. Okay. Now let me close this and we can see inside our package.json file, we have this entry for React Router DOM version 6.4.3. Okay. So this is the major version and these are the so 6.4 is the major version, right? Okay, and now what we will do is let's set up the routing. So we'll go inside main.jsx. We will say we need to make use of the browser router. So we're getting the browser router from React Router DOM. Okay, and what we want to do is we want our routing to be available throughout the app. That is why we have nested the app component inside the browser router. So there are different types of routers available. For example, browser router, uh, and there is just router, then there is a memory router. So different types are available. Since we are interested in doing the uh, routing at the level of the browser, we will make use of this component. Then the next thing that we want to do is we'll go inside our app and we'll set up the routing. Okay, and in case you guys are not clear what is going on, just wait a couple of minutes. We'll set the things up and then it will be clear as to what we're trying to do. Okay. All right. So this is what we have, right? Let's do one thing. Uh, here what we will do is let's define routes. Okay, so this routes we are getting from React Router DOM. Okay, this is a component provided by them. Then within this we want to define a particular route. Okay, so let's use the route component, which is again coming from here as well. And what we will do is we will say the path for this is slash, right? So it is associating a particular path with a particular component. So in order to specify a component, we use the element prop and we pass the component that we want to render over here. So what I will do is I will create a component over here. Okay, function, uh, you know, for example, dashboard. Okay, and this will say return h1. This is dashboard, for example, and here we will pass the element that we want to render at this path, right? So we want to display the dashboard component when this is the path. Okay, so you can see when we are at 5174, so whenever the the base route is there, right, just a slash is there, right, or nothing is there, so it will show the dashboard component. Now what we want to do is, suppose we have another path like let's duplicate this. We have slash about. Okay, this is the URL, and in that case what we want to do is display the about component. Okay, return h1. Okay, this is about, and suppose I type something like this slash about. Oh wait, I forgot to associate the component with this path, so I want to show the about component here. So now you can see that when we are at slash about, this is rendering the about component. Okay, and suppose I say back, so we are back to dashboard. When I go to the about component, it is showing the about component here. Okay, all right. And similarly, let me try and add another component, say home. Okay, slash home. Whenever this is the path, we will be showing the home component. And since we are in React, all of these can be self-closing, and something like this. Okay, let's create a component for the home as well. Function home, return, this is home. Okay, now when I click on, when I type slash home, you can see it is showing me the home component. So what we have been able to do using this component is that uh, these are all known as routes. Each path has been associated with a particular component. So when we are just at this path, right, it is showing us the dashboard. When we are saying about, it is showing us the about component. When we are saying home, it is showing us the home component. So, and let's take a look at the elements over here. So you can see that this is the uh, If we take a look at our main page, right, this is the root element, correct? And we have the root element, and inside that we have our app component which is returning the routes. And based on the route that we are on, it will display the component associated with that route. So suppose I change this to about, right? You can see over here now the root component has the about component as its child. If I am showing, if I am saying home over here, then the home component is the child, right? So it's basically, as the route is changing, it's removing that particular component, and instead in its place it is placing the component associated with the next route, right? So as the URL is changing, we are showing different components. Now this is very useful uh, whenever you're trying to create a single page application. So what a single page application means, that there is only a single index.html page, right? There's only one page, and each route is associated with a specific component, right? As the route changes, the component associated with that route is shown and the previous component is replaced. So all of the logic is on the client side. That means it is running in the browser. Okay. And so like back in the day, many years ago, maybe almost a decade ago, what used to have happen is we only used to have server side, um, the flow used to happen like this. You would request the data from the server, it would show you the page. Whenever you made updates to that page, you would send the updates to the server, it would process those updates on the server, create a new page and send it back to the client. Then since JavaScript evolved quite a lot, the concept of single page applications was introduced, and all the logic of uh, going back to the server, that round trip was reduced. Instead, all of this was taken care of at the client itself. So you can see that we are no longer going to the server, we are basically just changing the route. Okay, so for example home or about, and we are just displaying the component associated with that, and all of that is being taken care of at the client side itself or at the level of the browser. We're not making round trips to the server and coming back. So the advantage of having a single page application is that it is saving us the round trip, and it is much faster to load that particular page, right? We're still on the same page, only sections or parts of the page are being updated. Okay, so that is why routing is pretty useful. Okay, and you can navigate to different sections of your website uh, using this. So we look at a few more functionality over here. So suppose we want to create a layout, right? We want a header, or suppose we want a side nav. So what we can do here is we can have a component. So function layout, which defines the layout for the app, and we can have something like this, that this returns a header. Okay, and we have the header, then we have the, let's move all of this inside a fragment. Then we have the main element, and then we have the footer, for example. Okay, and what we will do over here is that at the root level we will be showing the layout, right? And the layout will be rendering the other routes. So here what we will say is the header will have the navigation. Okay, and suppose we have different links, ul which has say 3 lis. Okay, so we have about, home, and then for example contact, or not contact, maybe dashboard. Okay, and we're rendering the layout over here. And what we can do is, just like we have these routes, right, we can also have nested routes. So this is the component which is being rendered at this level, and then this route has, nested routes. So what we will do is we will move all of these in here, and let's add a route for the dashboard. Okay, so actually let's make this as the home route. I mean, this is the default route for the layout. Let's leave the path, let's make the path as blank, and there's an attribute known as index. So we were providing this, that means this is the starting main route inside this. This is the main nested route. Then we have a path for dashboard, and the element associated with that is the dashboard component, right? Okay, and then we have the about. All right, so now you can see that we are rendering at this level, we are rendering the navigation, right? We are rendering the, let's inspect this. So we have the header, then we have the navigation, then we have the main, and then we have the footer as well. So let me just add some text over here. This is the footer. Okay, and this is the main. This is where all the, what we want to do over here is we want to show the contents, right? So whenever we are going to home, we want to show the home component inside the main, and whenever we are inside about, we want to show that, and so on. So what we will do is, in order to show nested routes, we want to import another component known as the outlet, right? So this outlet component is useful whenever we want to whenever we have nested routes. Okay, that is, a main route has child route. So this is our main route, right, slash, and we're displaying the layout component. Let's go to our components over here, and you can see that we are displaying the layout. Okay, and as we change the routes, we want to display these components. So here we will say that we will make use of the outlet component, which is coming from React Router DOM. Let's save this. And now you can see that within the layout, we have the outlet, and within that we have the home component, right? So we were saying that when the URL is this, the default component or the index component which needs to be shown is the home component. That is why over here we are seeing this. These are the links, and then this is the home, and then we have the footer, right? And now what we will do is we will change the URL. When we are saying slash dashboard, you can see that now this has, instead of the home component, we're seeing the dashboard component, right? So we have very easily set up this layout. We have this header, we have the main, and then we have the footer. As we are changing the URL, the the contents of main are being changed. Okay, let's style this just a bit so that it looks nice. Mm, let me comment all of this. All right, and let's go to our index. Let me comment this out. Okay, and what we will do is we'll make use of grid over here. Let's take a look at the structure once. So we have the app has the layout, which is having basically all of these elements. So let's do one thing. Let's use react.fragment here. And let's say class, actually can't use this like this. What we'll do is let's use a div, and we will say let's give a class container, or let's just call this as layout, and let's give this header. Okay, and then let's call this as content, and let's give this the class footer. Okay, all right, let's go inside index.css, and here we will say dot layout display grid. We will specify grid template. So we will specify the columns over here. So we will say repeat. We will have 3 columns of 1 fraction each, and grid template rows. So the first row we will reserve for the header, right? And the remaining we need a row for the header, then one for the main and one for the footer. So the first row will take up as much space required by it, then the next row will take up 1 fraction, and the footer will take up as much space that it needs. Okay, now let's define the grid template areas. So the first row will be taken up by the header. Okay, so we have 3 rows, right? So header, header, header. Then the next row will be taken up by the content, and the next row will be taken up by the footer. Okay, and we will say dot header, the element which has the header class, its grid area is the header. Then the one with the content, its grid area is content, right? The areas which we have defined over here. And similarly for the footer, we will specify the grid area as footer like this. So let's see. So the topmost area is being taken up by this, then the content, and then the footer. Let's see, we had said that the header, it will take up as much space that it needs, then this should take up, and then the footer. What am I missing over here? Template rows, auto 1 fraction, and auto once again. Okay, one sec. Let me give this the name main, for example. Where is our app? Let's call this as main. Okay, so this has no influence to it. Layout. One sec. Okay, the height. All right, so this entire thing takes up. We will set the height as 100%. Root. One second. So the body has been height of 100. Okay. And here we'll say the height is 100 VH, whatever is the viewport height, that should be available. And so the body is taking up this entire height, and the root element takes up the 100% of the height, and the same needs to be done by the layout as well. This is the body, root. Okay, one sec. I think there's some style is coming from the V tab. For now, I'll just set this to 100 VH. And now you can see that, the home is coming over here, and the rest of the space is taken up by the main content, and the rest of it by the footer. Okay. All right. So this is how you can easily set up, a navigation. And when we say something like dashboard, that particular content is being shown over here. And we can add some padding over here as well. Padding 16 pixels. Okay, so we have the padding, right? And we can do some more styling as well. So inside the header, we have all of these links, right? So what we want to do now is, when we're clicking on these links, we want to be able to navigate to that particular route, right? So for that purpose, we have another special component, which is known as the link component. So we make use of the link component. Okay, and we give the path. So here we want to navigate to about, right? Slash about, and the text is about. And similarly, we want to do the same here. We want to get the link component from the React router DOM. We want to say path equals slash. We want to display the home component, and we have another link, and we will specify the path as slash dashboard, right? And we will display the text dashboard. So you can see we have these now. Now when I click on this, wait a sec, am I missing something? Okay, instead of path, I need to say to. So the path prop is only used for the route. So this is the link to the path. We specify that over here. All right. And now when I click on about, it is taking me to the about route. Similarly, when I want to go to home, I can click on this. When I want to go to dashboard, it is taking me to the dashboard. So this is how you can set up the navigation, right? And it will take you to that particular component. Okay. All right. So this is the advantage of using the React Router DOM. It allows us to create a single page application. Uh, there are other functionalities as well. This library also allows you to do server side rendering, but right now we'll be restricting the focus on client side routing only. Uh, and this is what we have learned so far. So in case you guys have any doubts, you can ask me over here as to what is going on, uh, what are we doing over here, how we have been able to set up the routes, define the elements associated with a particular route. Okay. And where is all this coming from? So this is coming from React Router DOM component, right? Which we installed. We got the browser router. So there's a lot of documentation associated with this, which has been shared with you guys in the resources. So when you go and do the take home assignment associated with this session, uh, you go through the resources, and there are different links available. You go through that, and we'll be building another app as well, so that you guys get an idea of how to set up routing and get a project under your for your portfolio, which you can use to demonstrate that you understand routing, how you can set it up, how you can create complex routes, nested routes, all of those things. We'll be looking at that as well. Okay. So any doubts so far? You can ask me in the comments. In the meantime, I'll just try and style this a bit more. So we have the header which has the navigation. All right. So what we will do is we'll target the header and the nav element, and we will say display flex. Actually, we want to target the the UL. All right, and we want to say that the list style is none, and we want to specify justify content space evenly, and we have this kind of structure available. And for the header, we can have a border bottom. mm, and we want to specify the border style as well. So border solid and 1 pixel. And let's do one thing, let's get rid of the padding. Solid and 1 pixel and the border color, yeah, like this. Okay. And similarly, let's add a border top solid 1 pixel, and let's use the same color. All right. So this we have set up. Okay. So we have a nice little layout with some navigation on the top and just the main content which is updating. Okay. So any doubts related to what we have built so far? If not, we'll end the session here and I'll see you guys in the voice channel in Discord. Okay, I'm waiting. Okay, fine. Since there are no doubts, let's end this stream here and I'll see you in the next session. For doubts, we'll meet right away in the Discord channel. So until then, take care and we'll meet again.